Okay, thank you. I put this up here so we didn't have to do the introductions. I hope you've all figured out who I am. But basically, I'm a Mac guy who wrote a book earlier this year on productivity. The book is mainly for getting yourself set up individually, and here I'm expanding on part of the book where I talk about working with teams. So we'll be doing that, doing a different focus in the book in this one. The title of the talk is Training Yourself. Oh, sorry, let me apologize first. I have a cough that I haven't quite shaken yet. So if I'm taking cough drops that are numbing my mouth. So if you can't understand what I'm saying or I need to repeat myself, just wave at me and I'll repeat what I just said. And if I start coughing, I'll take off the mic and put it back on. Basically, I've got parts of the talk that I might move to the end of the talk to give myself a speaking break. The title of the talk is Training Yourself and Your Team to Be More Productive, but that's a bit of a bait and switch because the real topic is this: training yourself and your team to be more productive if that is your best outcome. And the reason I phrase it that way is that there are things that I don't understand since I've been writing the book and since the book was published. People come to me with the same questions about productivity, and there is this, it's like water to a fish. There's an assumption in the questions. Of course we want to be more productive. The whole point is to get more things done in less time or to get higher quality things done in less time. And what I don't understand is that they take it as given that the number of things they're currently doing and the number of things they want to add to that list are fixed quantities. They're not variable. No one considers getting more productive and more organized by doing fewer things or different things or the same number of things over a longer period of time, which is just mathematically the easiest way to approach the problem. So I bring this up to make sure that when you do your big picture planning, you include the concept of the input as well as the processing time. If your track record for big projects is, say, 3 big things a year that at the end of the year you mark off as done, you shouldn't plan for 10, you shouldn't plan for 6. You should plan for 3 because you know that's your existing capacity. And then if you do get more productive and you finish them early, then you pick a 4th for the next couple of months. If you plan for 6 and do 4, that's an improvement in your productivity, but you'll still feel like you fell short, and you'll probably be stressed by that. So when I say outcomes, the reasons why you plan for productivity, people have very different reasons for why they work. And when I say work, I don't just mean the work you do for money or the work you do as your career or your profession. I also mean the work you do keeping your household running, as a volunteer, or member of your community. All these things can be considered to be work projects, just different kinds of work. And people have very different reasons to do that. Making money is the first one, because most of us can't afford to work for free. Most of us take satisfaction in the quality of a job well done. Most people, I think, separate from the satisfaction, it's important to them to present professionally and have an ethical code that they live up to. And stepping stones to future goals, that your job might not be where you want to be now, but it's where you want to be, what you have to do now to be where you want to be in 5 years or 10 years. And these are the most common reasons why people work. But none of these speak necessarily to getting more done or getting higher quality things done. If your goal is to make money, and you have a certain number in mind that you're satisfied you'll hit, then it's only if you're paid for the quantity or the quality of things you do that productivity has anything to do with that goal. If your goals are satisfaction or professional presentation, well, obviously it's easier to do both of those things with fewer people to service or fewer projects to do, because then you're giving more of things individual attention. If your productivity goals are stepping stones to future goals, then it's only if the process of promotion is related to productivity, and if the people who are in charge of those promotions actually will reward you for that productivity, does that productivity work to it? So knowing your goal, knowing your reasons why you work, knowing what makes you happy is crucial before you get to the question of what am I increasing my productivity to do, and is increasing my productivity the best way to get to that? Now, in addition to what you're doing and what you're thinking about yourself, If you work with anybody else, and everybody does, they have their own perspective on this. They've got their own reasons for being there. Unless you're particularly close, unless you have a friendship that would be categorized as a friendship outside of work, this is not the kind of thing you discuss with your work family. These are things you keep private. But you've got to know them well enough to know what their motivations are, to know what gets them out of bed in the morning, and to know why they want to be productive, why they want to present professionally to you. If you have a vested interest in motivating them to being more productive or be organized, or to at least be more reliable for what you ask for them. And the way to think about this is a poker game. Anybody here as obsessed with poker as I am play semi-regularly? Okay. Nobody, so I'll explain. In a poker game, it looks like a card game, but in order to be an expert at the game, you're not worried about the cards so much. The cards and the mathematics and the gambling part of it, that's step one. You learn that in the first 6 months of the game. What you're really doing in a poker game is you're playing with 8 other people. There's 9 people at the table, and I need to know that when the guy 3 to my left, if he's telling me a story and suddenly stops short, and mid-sentence, he just stops talking because he looks at his cards. For some people, that means that he's sitting on a great hand, and other people, it means he's sitting on an awful hand. And by watching him and paying attention to him, I learn what his reactions are, and then 15 minutes later, when I see to know that for the other 8 people at my table in order to play the game properly, because that's the level of skill that I want to play at. It's not just it's not just the individuals, it's also how person number 4 and person number 6 interact with each other, because when it's 4 and 6 and me in the same hand, how they react to each other is going to affect how I play as well. So the game is happening on one level with the cards, the game is happening on another level on knowing the people at the table. So this brings me back to people having very different reasons for why they work. If you have a 10-person company, or if you're working, either you work in a 10-person company or you have a 10-person company as a client, that's 10 different people to understand. Those 10 people have 90 different interpersonal relationships with each other, one-to-one. And if I've done the math right, a 10-person company has 6,235,290 possible teams of people they could deploy for how you're working with them. The dynamics of all of that doesn't affect the level of where you're working, because your work remains the same. It affects the dynamics of how you work interpersonally. And if you're going to try to approach them at that level where the problem is not what they do, the problem is how they do it, or even if it's not a problem. Somebody comes to you on your team and says, I am very stressed because of my workload. You're happy with their output, but they're unhappy. So you need to work with them at the psychological level before you have any chance of giving them advice, help, or instructions that will bring them to a different level of how they're approaching their work. So let's talk about reasons why you should be better at productivity, why other people should be better at productivity. The first reason is that if you add up the amount of time you work in a week and the amount of time you spend preparing to work, driving to work, getting dressed, doing dry cleaning, all those things, you're probably going to spend 55 to 60% of your week dedicated to your work. If that time is not spent maximizing productivity or satisfaction or some other emotional concern for you, then in your life you're putting a great deal of weight on what you do with the other 40% of your time in order to make you happy and satisfied. So purely from, most people think of their careers as their central thing and everything fits in around it. So if that's the biggest chunk of your life, then you want to make sure that that is doing what it's supposed to do for you to be living well. For most people, if they have in their mind what they need to do for a certain client or by a certain month or before they go on vacation or what have you, keeping up with that list or being ahead of that list just feels better. You feel more comfortable. Alternately, even if you're not caught up, even if you know that next week is going to be hell and you have a lot of work to do, knowing that your productivity system has everything well documented and it's at least under control what you're approaching and when you're going to approach it, that also tends to be less stressful. So those are the first reasons to be better at productivity that have nothing to do with getting more done. That's just being happier. It's when you get to the 5th bullet, you say, okay, my problem is the quantity of my output, the quality of my output. That's when you're talking about productivity as an absolute number by the way that you're choosing to measure it. And that's the only point where that becomes your goal. If that's your goal, that's fine. But that, like I said before, the frequently asked questions that I don't understand is people come to me with that as the assumption, and that should not be the assumption. That should be a conclusion you arrive at. In order to do that, you need to psychologically understand yourself the way you understand others at the poker table or others on the 6 million teams. Most of us spend 24 hours, well, I guess 16 hours a day awake with ourselves, and most of us are the least qualified person to understand ourselves because we're so used to ourselves, we don't look at ourselves the same way others do. So a self-understanding is crucial to making sure that you can design your system such that it makes you happy and satisfies you. The feedback you get from people who are close to you is really important data to have here. So in this context, there are two major types of productivity management systems. There's the applications and the other tools, some technological, some not, that organize you personally as a personal system that is, your life goes in there and it helps you keep things on track. There are other apps and tools that are mainly for teams. They're built from the ground up to, you put 6 people in there or 60 people in there or 600,000 people in there and everybody can interconnect with each other. And they also, use this to store the data they use to run their lives. You need one of each. They must be kept separate. And the reason I said a Mac Pro and a 2-year-old with a hammer is, show of hands, anybody in the room run email servers, have done that in the past? Okay, about a quarter of the room. Anybody in the room, as part of running your email server, you had a legitimate reason to look at people's emails and were absolutely shocked by what you saw people sending on their work computers to each other? Just me? Okay, my favorite time, this happened 5 or 6 times, but my favorite time was the time that I was the CTO of a startup, and I found the 2 partners who were my bosses emailing back and forth about how they were going to screw over all their consultants by not paying them for 6 months because they were broke. And I was being paid as a consultant. And they sent it back and forth in the work email system, apparently not realizing that their email guy can read this email. Meanwhile, another partner was involved in some personal life issues, and he was also discussing that at work with the people involved outside of work. These things should not be on a work computer. I should not be able to see this information, and they should have had the at least the wisdom, even if they're not techies, to let this nowhere near me. So in your personal productivity system, you're going to have life goals. You might take notes about working with the people, your coworkers. You might write things down that you don't want them to see. If your personal productivity system is part of the work system that your work provides you, well, your CTO, your tech people, the guy who fixes your printer can read that. Your boss actually has a legal ownership of it in the United States. So I'd say personal stuff on your equipment, team stuff on their equipment, and then basically one of the things we'll talk about when we get to tools is it is convenient to be able to hit the button and manually move information from one to the other. You want to have methods of doing that so it's automated and easy. But you don't want to have the whole kit and caboodle of either one. You might not be allowed to take your team data outside of work. You don't want your personal data touching your work. So $15,000 iMac Pro, 2-year-old with a hammer, that's the level of importance on this one. In addition to the software you use that you think of as your task management software, you also have dozens of places where you store information for later, make lists of things to do, organize these things, and all these things require your attention first when you write them down, but then you've got to go back to them. So I've got some suggestions here of what they are. Obviously, your email box. Some people use their Mac desktops for their working files. Other people just use it as a plain old documents folder, and everything they've done for 2 years is on there. An actual physical desktop with paper on it. Mobile applications, other stacks of paper, whiteboards, fridge magnets, and hey Siri, remind me to buy milk. These are all places where you're storing these things. If you're walking home with an important piece of paper to remind you to do something, and you put it on your credenza on the way into your house, and then you don't look at it for 3 days, that piece of paper might as well not be there anymore. If you put it on the stack of mail that you keep on the dining room table, maybe just my house, that you keep on the dining room table, and you reliably check your mail every day on the dining room table, well, you're going to see that piece of paper. So when you store this information, you should know what your places are, and you should put them in the places that you can rely on yourself to check. And I call this process pointing yourself, which means the common way of doing this, I mean, like I said, everybody has these places. You currently have a system of storing information for later. What we don't normally do until we think about it is to make a list, a to-do list of checking all the places. So that way, if you have, let's say you're in your car, your kid breaks a small toy. You take the broken toy and you throw it into the cup holder, because that way every time you get in the car, you'll see the broken toy and you'll know I have to buy this new toy. The problem is that when you see that toy, you're getting into your car to go somewhere, that place is not a toy store. So you need to have a way to remind yourself to look at the cup holder at a time when you can then say, okay, in 30 minutes, I will go to the toy store. That has to be a separate action, or you need to be in the habit of looking at the cup holder on the way home from wherever you're going, that you can then go to the toy store. If the cup holder is the first time you've ever thrown something in there, and you never look at it again, or you put a cup on top of it, you haven't recorded the information, you're never going to get back to it. So this list of places that you store and organize things is a crucial part, the first part of whatever system you build. So this is what that system looks like. Another show of hands, who in the room is currently using something like Things or OmniFocus or some kind of project management system? Okay, that's about a third. And who in the room has kind of cobbled something together that sort of works for them, where you've got reminders on your iPhone and maybe a to-do list that you keep on Microsoft Word or in some mobile app? Okay, so no hands are raised on that one. Here's the thing. Everyone in this room works. Everyone in this room has probably spent decades working. You all have systems. Joe might not. We discussed this when I was writing the book. Joe keeps it all in his head, which I don't understand how he does it. No one else I've ever talked to in 25 years researching this for my personal use and writing the book can keep it all in their heads. Anybody who tries goes absolutely insane. Everybody here, you all have something. You all have some kind of ad hoc system. Most people learned it in high school and never really changed it much. Like you learn, you have to show your work in high school, so you have to bring in your notes and that kind of thing for part of your grade. You get to college, it's a different kind of research, so you kind of change some things. But most people don't really think about this stuff until they hit their first job. And they'll make changes from job to job based on what they do, but they don't get under the hood. They don't look at their actual mechanisms. And if you don't think about it, you're going to be doing this out of rote and habit. I personally hate waking up before 11 o'clock in the morning. Around 6 in the afternoon, there's certain kinds of work like writing. I do very well at the end of the official work day. I go to Starbucks, I sit for 3 hours to get some really good writing done. Now, it could be that in the last 20 years, at some point the switch was flipped, and maybe 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. is my best time of day to do a certain kind of work. I slip through it every day, I wouldn't know. Until I come up with the idea and test it, it's not going to be done, and that's the problem with ad hoc systems. A planned system basically means you come up with procedures and tools, you try them out, you see what works, and this is the structure of how they all interact. In the upper left-hand corner where the spotlight is, that's what I call the task app in the book. You can think of it as your command and control center. You can call it your primary app. You can call it where you put most things, but it's the first place you look in the morning for what you need to do today. It's the place you look on Sunday if you want to plan out what you're doing for the next week or two. It's the place you look towards the end of the year, coming New Year's, when you think, all right, 2018 is pretty planning app, where the information that goes there is meant to keep you on course in a big picture way and also at a mid-level way. But some do, but most apps like this don't have a built-in calendar. So that's the first connection with the part of what you do in your task app is you point yourself to your calendar once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day, depending on how busy your calendar is, to say, look it up and get an idea of the next 6 hours of my life. So I know how much time I have to do the things I've set out to do. You're also going to point yourself to the reminders app on your phone where you say, hey, Siri. If you use the Notes app, you're pointing yourself there as well. And then in the lower left, where I've got pages and numbers, for the readers of the book, they're non-technical, so that's where they're going to do their work. In your case, this is going to be much more technical stuff. It'll be a terminal window, what have you. But that's the actual, everything else that involves organizing your work. Lower left is where you actually do your work. The arrows are what I call pointers in the book, and a pointer is basically, it's a kind of task that just tells you, go over here and look at the thing over here or do the thing over there. So when you have a Post-it note on your monitor that you scribble down and it says, call your spouse at 4 p.m., the Post-it note is a pointer to the phone call. You can call it a reminder. I use the word pointer because they have a special meaning within organizing yourself and transitioning to organizing yourself without letting things fall on the floor that I'll get to in a minute. So this is a personal management system. This is a picture of OmniFocus. It is my belief that, instinct, I don't have data on this, that most people who do technical work want something of this level of complexity. This is about around the most complex personal organized system you can have, unless you're getting into a full customer relation management system. OmniFocus 3 has a lot more bells and whistles than the previous version did. There is a learning curve involved. Non-technical people frequently hit this wall, go back to something simpler, but I think this is where you want to be. The problem is when you pick out the application that you're using as your command and control center, you want to make sure there's plenty of headroom because this will be the hardest app to replace in the future if it doesn't work for you. Every other tool we're going to discuss, you're going to be swapping those in and out every couple of months if you need to. But this one is the hardest one because it's central. There's too much there. It's too structured. The other app that is easier than this people switch to is called Things 3. It's a very nice app. It's not nearly as powerful, much easier to learn how to use. But if you're starting with Things 3 and you hit the ceiling of something more complex than you need, you're migrating again when you hit that wall. OmniFocus 3, if you don't need the complexity, you can turn it off. You can turn off the display. But if you need it 2 years from now, it's already there, and you don't have to learn a whole new system. Like I said, the other kind of app is team management. This is a picture of Daylight, which is a customer relationship management system for Mac. Now, team apps don't have the same kind of standardization that personal apps do. If you use OmniFocus, you're going to see things that just look like grocery lists and reminders. Team apps, though, they can be this. They can look like Basecamp. They can look like apps that you load into Slack, and they're all going to have totally different paradigms of how they manage communications and delegations and providing reporting and overviews. So I like Daylight because it's the easiest customer relationship management system I've ever seen. Most of them have a huge learning curve, both for the users and the developers. This one is much easier to move into. And because CRMs are ridiculously complex, there will be very little you can't do in it or hire a programmer to build custom code that will give it to you. But like I said, you could just have a Slack, the free account, that does most of what you need to do. You could have Basecamp. You could have a ticketing system that you use for your customer support calls that has an add-on that allows you to do internal management. If you don't have something like this, it's the same situation as you're not having a planned project manager for yourself. You have a system to yourself that you use for your productivity. Your teams, every team you have, your family, your workplace, your clients, has something like this. If it's not planned, then it's ad hoc. It's the people with 1,400 messages in their inbox that acts as their to-do list. It's the people who have 5 Facebook Messenger messages that are work-related. They've got 10 things in Google Hangouts, and they've got 20 on iMessage. And they've got to remember all 3 places for that. It's the particular, the meetings you have every Thursday, in addition to the emails that only went to half the people who should have seen them. All these ad hoc systems held together by chewing gum is what you have if you don't have something like this. So if your team doesn't have something like this, and if you don't have an individual system, it is a learning curve to get there, which I'm going to get to next, but this is the biggest win you're going to get. In the future, it's going to be the curve will flatten out. You can always improve, but going from very little planning to some planning and tools that are not designed for this to tools that are designed for this is the biggest bang for the buck you're ever going to get. The biggest mistake technical people make when they make these decisions is they pick the wrong tools for the job. Using your email inbox to keep track of your to-do lists, such that if it's in your inbox, you still have to deal with it at some point, is the worst tool for that job, for reasons that Adam Engst is about to publish in tidbits in a week or two. So send me an email, that email address, and I'll let you know when the article is published. The problem is that technical people love clever fixes. I spend all this time putting out everything to OmniFocus. I want OmniFocus to be the be-all and end-all of everything I do. I never look anywhere else. So I spend, this is several years ago before I learned better, I spend 10 hours a week taking perfectly good lists from other places and organizing it in OmniFocus and moving things around and playing with my data and not actually getting anything done. I'm just, Merlin Mann calls it stacking sandwich orders instead of making sandwiches. It's clever. You can come up with ways of banging a square peg into a round hole, but you shouldn't do that. So this link here is an article I wrote for OmniFocus's own blog saying, hey everybody, this is when you should not use the product that this blog is here to promote. Because if you try to use OmniFocus for these things, it will frustrate you, and then you'll get frustrated about the things it can do because you already have, you're now approaching it emotionally rather than rationally. What you should do, you should use OmniFocus for the things it's very good at. That's a lot of things. And when it doesn't work for you, that's when you use other tools. This is your glue code for using a better tool. So if I can't do something in things, but things gives you, I think, 3 levels of nesting, where you can do a project, and then a sub-project, and then tasks, but eventually it stops. I mean, let's use that as an example. I don't know if it stops, but some apps do. So if I need a deeply nested list for a 5-year project, and I'm using things as my primary app, I shouldn't try to figure out how to flatten that to make it fit in there. I should pull up Omni Outliner, do my outline there, or do it in Microsoft Word, whatever outlining program you want it, that's how you want to organize it. And then in things, I put a pointer that says, for this project, don't look here, look over there. Look at the Omni Outliner document, look at Microsoft Word document, look at the whiteboard where you've made a mind map, wherever it is that it's gone. You've now spent no time wrestling with the software, and you're using what you think is the best tool for that job. And then when that particular tool stops working for you, you now have a granular thing that you can take out of your system, and you can put in something better for that, while things is still your command and control center. And all of these, that's how you incrementally improve your system. The things you point to don't have to be applications, don't have to be technological at all. Like I said, when you have places that you're pointing to remind yourself to look there again, that's a cup holder, that's a glove compartment that could be asking your spouse at 6 o'clock, honey, what am I supposed to do tomorrow? If she keeps it in her head and it's not in yours, then you're good to go. So you should use what works for each particular type of information you store. You should use what works for each type of information that you organize. If you're not comfortable with the tool, it's a bad tool. It doesn't matter how good it is, it's a bad tool for you. If you have a fantastic tool that does 70% of what you need to do with your life, don't try to put the other 30% in there. Now, the way you transition to better tools, and since most people in this room are not currently using something like OmniFocus, this is the crucial point. The reason people fail at OmniFocus and Things 3 and any of these monolithic central command systems is that when you start to move your stuff into an organizational system, you're learning new habits, you're making changes to how you run your life, and your life doesn't stop for 3 weeks while you do this. It takes time to put things in OmniFocus. It takes time to plan and to make large decisions about what you want to do with your life and what you want to do with the next 3 months. All these things come out of your work time. If you have a project to get organized, and I've seen this on 1,000 to-do lists, I used to put them on my own. I'm going to get organized this weekend. I've got 16 hours on Saturday and Sunday, and all I'm going to do is get organized. And then 1 hour into it, I realized, oh, crap, I've got this client thing that's due Monday. Well, the client's not going to wait for me to get organized, so now I'm losing time out of the organization process. Instead, what you do is you have a transition system that respects that and allows you to move from whatever you're doing now to something that is more organized over a period of time. I can't say enough that having read OmniFocus forums, life balance forums, all these community forums, all these software that I've tried in the last 20 years and the last 10 years when they started getting decent. This is the thing where people fail the most. Throw out their software and go back to whatever they were doing before. The first thing you do with any new software, pardon me, the zero thing, which I said on the last slide, the first thing you do when you're transitioning to better tools is pick out what you think is going to be good enough. Do not research the application for 6 months to make sure that it has every bell and whistle you want. Pick the one that you think looks good to you, that it's a pretty interface, it looks like the way you think. The one bit of advice I'll give you, which is important, is go with a little more complexity and a little more power than you think you need, because no one ever needs simpler than they think they need. They always need a little more complex. So that's the only place where you're not going on a gut feeling. But gut feelings and a week of research is fine. Some of the software is quite expensive. Some of the software you'll be spending a lot of time working with. It's a decision you want to give time to. Do not make it into a, I must have the best. Good enough is where you want to be right now. That's step one. Step two is you've got all of your old places in whatever you're doing right now. I've already shown you this list. The first thing you do with this list is you put it into your new software. In OmniFocus, there's a, the first project would be look in these places. Email, Mac desktop, actual desktop, then individual entries for each mobile application I store information in. They will repeat at different times. I might check my email twice a day. I might check the stack of paper mail only once a week. That's fine. But I want to make sure that I'm reliably getting all these places, because once I know I am reliably getting these places on a particular schedule, I also know that if I put that piece of paper on the stack of mail on Wednesday, I will see it on Sunday. And if I need to see it on Friday, I can't use that method of reminding myself. I have to put it into the place that I will see on Friday. And since you're doing this repetitively, this becomes muscle memory. You'll know how to do this. That's your step one. You're documenting everything in your old system. In addition to the 70% place, the primary task app, you'll be using new tools to fill in the 30% where it's not good at what it does. Now, these icons are going to be a list of all the tools I personally have used in the last year. And unfortunately, it ran out of space. I only got it from A through O. So there'd be another 2 rows if I put in all of the icons. And this gives you an idea of how often I switch out my apps. You probably won't want to do this quite as much. I like new tools. They're bright and shiny, and every time it's like I'm a kid at Christmas. Every time I open up a new app and play with all the menus and see what sounds it makes. But the reason I'm so aggressive about this is that I know that there are things I can do in Gmail which will save me a hell of a lot of time over if I try to do them in Mail app. And even to the point where sometimes I use Gmail on my Mac, and sometimes I use it on my phone, and there's actually different interfaces that my phone is better at some things than my Mac is. So if you need multiple tools to meet multiple needs, and you've identified your needs, just pick good enough tools for now. These actually will be easier to fix later, so you can put even less time into picking them out. And I guarantee you that if you've planned out granularly enough what you think you need, you already have most of these tools. You have something, everybody here is using email. You have an app you use for that. Maybe you put some planning into it, but you've never actually thought of it in terms of this app must do these things in order to integrate into this grander system that I'm not building. So this is what I call the dog food process. After you have the list of the places you look, the first thing your productivity system manages is how to use a productivity system, because where you want to be after it's working for you is muscle memory. You don't wake up and think, oh, I have to go look at OmniFocus. You pull up OmniFocus at the end of breakfast or over a cup of coffee. It's automatic, the same way that some people put on music whenever they go running, or check their email in the morning, or look at Facebook before they go to bed. It's just automatic. So these tasks are not intuitive. They are not habitual yet. If there are things that you need to do to make your task management system work for you, That's your first project that goes into your system. You've got one thing that says look in the places, and one thing that says this is what I need to do to make this work. And since you're new at this and you're new using the software the first time, you'll be editing this as you go. This is your best guess for now, and you'll be refining it as you go through. So I've already mentioned this pointers to your old system. The old system means everything you're currently doing, designed or not. What you did before you left for this conference on Monday, that's your old system. The only thing that changes at first is that the new system has the things you need to do to make the new software work for you, which is right now a very short list, and all the places in your old system that you check to remind yourself of things to do. So if you got one important project right now that is currently in an Omni Outliner document, and you have another important project that's currently in a folder of emails sitting in in Mail app or Gmail, then what it says in the new app, new productivity app, is go look in these places on a repeating basis to make sure you haven't put anything new there. Go to this Omni Outliner document for when you want to work on this particular project, and when you want to work on this particular other project, you go over to this particular folder in your email app. You're just documenting that as you go. The only habit change that you do at this point is instead of looking at your 12 different places and figuring out on the fly what you're doing next, you instead look at the central command app, the task app, that has the list already for you. One thing I won't have a time to get to in this talk is once you start working with it, a key part of using that is an ongoing incremental prioritization. So you're making decisions ahead of time on what you're doing at any given time, and that way you're not losing 10 minutes out of every hour deciding what you're going to spend that hour doing. Pardon me. So this is how the transitional productivity system works. You're not trying to replace your old system. You're not trying to do a monolithic switch to a new system. When you start, everything you're currently doing is still where all of it mostly lives. You haven't had time yet to move everything over. All you have in the new system are those two lists that I talked about. When you're working from everything that you were doing before you decided to switch, if you finish an old task or an old project, you check it off like you ever used to. You just cross it out and it's done. Anything new that is handed to you, anything that needs to repeat, if you see a repeating task on an old list, okay, that counts as new. It goes into the new software, the new tools, to remind you in the new tools to repeat that. Over time, as you check off your old stuff, and as you move stuff into the new software, eventually, well, it's going to go for 25%, 75%, and then 50-50. So as you get towards the end of this process, phase 1 is where you started, phase 2 is when you're split up, phase 3, mostly everything is in the new system. You take the few remaining pieces of paper in the old system, you put that information into the new system, boom, you've now migrated, and you've done it in a way that fit into your available time while you were already working. Nothing came to a dead halt. And then I recommend taking everything in your old system. You can put it in a bonfire you like if it's very satisfying, but you definitely, this is not a joke, you definitely have to put the old system away. It's got to be out of sight, out of mind, and not something you will instinctively try to use again, because you've replaced it with better tools, but your habits to use the ad hoc system, the prior system, will still be in place for a while to come. Okay, so you're working with the new software. You're seeing where the bugs are. You're seeing where the rough edges are that you weren't quite ready for. That's what happens whenever you got any kind of learning curve, because when you picked up the software, you didn't know what you were going to learn by using it that would have helped you solve the problem in the first place. So after some time, you evaluate the tools that you thought they were good enough. For all of the tools that you have for specific tasks, like Omni Outliner, Hey Siri, those individual tools, if they don't work for something you need them to do, then all you do is swap that out for something else. If you need to replace your primary application, that's a bigger deal, which requires more time than I have here. This is the incremental process that improves your system over the long period of time. The ongoing process is you take this and you put this into a do loop that never ends. In 3 months, you evaluate your tools again and you see if they work. If everything's working fine, then you can wait 6 months and do it again. In the book, I recommend that every year or two, you should look at yourself top to bottom, both the quality of your tools, how happy you are, how satisfied you are, and what are the bigger goals from the first slides that we want to change that might change what I do with my system. Okay, so that's everything you do individually. To do it for your team, people who you work with that you can give advice to, but you can't actually, you're not their managers. They don't have to do what you say. So for your peers, the first step is know your people like it's a poker game. You sell them on changing their habits by speaking to the values that why they work. If you tell the person who is there for the money, and they won't tell you that, you've got to figure that out by intuiting it. The person who's there for the money, you've got to speak to them that, well, if you use the system, this sideline business you've been running, you'll make more money out of the sideline business. I mean, you can't affect your salary, but you might be able to go home at 4:30 instead of 6:30 and have more time to do your sideline thing. Whatever their values are, you speak to that because you have to convince them. This is not something that you can command. You only suggest a wholesale change like I'm telling you to do. You don't tell them, try OmniFocus. You suggest wholesale changes when they have a big problem. They come to you and they say, I am so stressed, miserable here. Maybe you should try something like this to really get yourself under control. And then if you recommend the same tools, well, suddenly the two of you are now working in an environment that will make her work or his work much easier for what you're doing. For people who are basically happy and satisfied with their work, but you're not satisfied with what kind of output you need to rely on, then you suggest individual things that might make their work a little bit easier. And if you're the tech person in a non-technical group, you come in the door with a little more credibility than most people would because they expect you to know every app in existence in the first place. If you need to sell your bosses on being more on why what they're telling you to do with the tools you have doesn't work for you, now you're in a supplicant situation. You've got to go in there with a really good argument. First step is know your bosses, like it's a poker game. You sell them on change by speaking to their values again. In this case, their professional value will most likely be make the company more profitable, make the nonprofit more effective, do what you're doing to serve the overall mission of the organization. That's usually their primary value, but they also have personal values. You know which ones of your bosses want that executive VP job in 5 years, and that it's more about flash than substance for this guy in terms of what you present to him. Knowing that helps you be more convincing. The key thought here is that if they are genuinely interested in making you more productive, and you convince them that your happiness and satisfaction is a part of that goal, document the time that's currently being requested of you so you can indicate my 40 hours a week is spoken for, my 50 hours a week is spoken for. If you give me another project, it's not a question of I make more time or I get more done in less time. If you give me the 6th project, you got to tell me which of the first 5 is less important because one of these 6 is going to suffer. And you got to tell me which one that is. And if they say, no, you're now going to do 7 projects and they're all important, then you say, at some point this job becomes untenable for me and I'm going to look for something else. And you don't say that as a threat, you just say that as this is the fact of life. You know, you are giving me more work to do, you are not compensating me for that work, for my effort or my time. That is the quid pro quo we have here. If I don't feel like I'm being valued for my time and my work, I will look for something else. You know, and if you say that in a threatening way, it will be bad. If you say that this is just a fact of life, you're reminding them that this is their job as a manager. In return, the people you manage, you can't come across like the pointy-haired boss either, because they have the same relationship with you that you have with your boss. You know your people, you sell them on change by speaking to their values and their self-interest, not the corporate interest. When your boss told you that his interest was the company must be profitable, well, you know, if the person one layer below you that you manage, by definition, is one layer below you. They aren't there to serve the company mission. They're there because they're 5 years behind you in their career. And they're probably a bit more ambitious, probably see different stepping stones. They're further away from the make my company profitable. Now, maybe they might be if they're in a nonprofit or in a social good organization, maybe they have the same mission. They really want to change the world this way. But that's their personal interest. speak to their self-interests, know them like the poker game. Don't assume that making our stock price go higher for our shareholders is as important to them as it is to your boss or to you, especially if they don't have stock yet. Give them the benefit of the doubt. If you have a new hire, assume they want to excel. They want to know how to use their tools properly for their own personal satisfaction and happiness until they prove you otherwise. When somebody walks into an office and you say, well, we use Slack for this and email for that, and you absolutely must use Outlook tasks for this thing, and here's the rigid structure you must work within, that's not telling them you want to excel. That's telling them that our IT department came up with these ideas 5 years ago, and you got to fit your square peg into those round holes. Give them the tools they need to excel, give them as much flexibility as you're allowed to, and work with them to use their tools as well as you want your tools to work. All right, I'm given a 5-minute warning, and I'm going to have to rush through some of these things. This is a procedure I call yak shaving. We're not going to get into specific techniques and a few specific apps as quickly as possible. Yak shaving is a process where you sit down to do a project or a task, especially a technical project, and you realize that before you can solve this one thing, you have to research this other thing for half an hour. That gives you information that you have to do this third thing first, and on and on. You're now working backwards, all these things you have to do. And then some of these things become their own sub-projects. Yak shaving is a process by tracking this all and making sure that you keep on task when a 15-minute job becomes a two-day job. Failing successfully, unfortunately, I have to refer to the book again. This should be read as the left column, right column. You've got the left column of the things that happen that cause you to fail. You've got the right column of things you do to recover from failure. Everybody using a task management system, when you build it and when you run it, is when you're running on average, when you're running normally. Everybody has life crises, has emergencies, gets sick, and when that happens, you need to adjust your system to fit your current capacities, not your normal capacities. This is how you do it. The key thing, again, going back to your original goals of being happy, most people judge their output and their productivity based on a platonic ideal of what they could do if they were perfect. Don't do against that. You pick the best day you've ever had, where you said at the end of the day, I was so productive today. Your best good day is your target every day. With a good productivity system and good planning, then you will get closer. You won't get your best good day every day, but you'll get more good days. And then once you have more good days, you can improve your planning system, improve your tools, make incremental changes to improve a little bit from that, and so on and so forth until most days are good days and some days are stellar days. And you're going up there on a slow curve that gets you there. That's done by constant incremental change of the tools you use, the approaches you take, and always, always, always having those things be congruent with your ultimate goals. So 15 seconds on each. Tools that I like, these are also dirt cheap. TotalSpaces 2 takes mission control and puts it in this 5x5 grid, provides hotkeys. This is my grid as of the other day. I can hit Control-7 at any time to get to see my G Suite account where I run my nonprofit. I can hit F3 to take me to my mail app. I can hit F2 that takes me to Gmail. Everything on the top is an individual project where the windows are organized. Everything that I was doing, that I stopped doing a day ago, I pick it up right up where I left off. Fluid 2 takes Safari, it uses Safari WebKit, makes them into standalone apps. It looks like a Safari page, but the reason you do it is, if you go back to this other page, my G Suite has a G Suite icon. I know what web pages are on that page because it has the icon badging it. I can also see that in my tab, in the command tab bar. You create these applications and suddenly you're not hunting through 500 Safari windows looking for the thing you left behind because the things you use all the time have their icons. Custom desktop cleanup. I use tags on my desktop files so everything is organized. On the left side is archives and individual projects. On the right side are my working files. Purple means something else. And I have an Apple script that creates this, which is not on the web yet, but email me and I will send it to you. Timing 2 watches what app is frontmost on your computer at any given time, keeps track of all the windows, and so at the end of the day, if you have no idea how much time you spent working for one client or how much time you spent surfing Facebook, it will tell you. Some people use this to track every minute on their Mac. I turn it on when I am at work on my Mac, and I turn it off when I'm not at work, but might be fooling around with a few things. This has changed my life. I've used it for a month, and I am so much better in control of my time because at the end of the day, I know what my time was, and that informs what I do tomorrow. This software called Zim, it's actually an X Windows app. This is Python GTK instead of Mac, but it runs on the Mac. This is all wiki stuff that has you can intersperse bullet lists and checkboxes. It has a journal, it has a calendar. I can make links to people. I've got a notes page on somebody I met here with the things that they told me about themselves, and I can say that it happened on November 7th. What I like about this is that it saves us all as plain text files. So if I'm not on my Mac, I'm on an iPad where there is no Zim application, I can pull up the text file in Dropbox and Drafts, edit it, put it back, and then I see it nicely formatted here. Duet Display, I think it's 20 bucks. Takes your iPad, turns it into a second monitor. Who doesn't need a second monitor and who doesn't want to have one at Starbucks? It's a no-brainer. Okay, so shameless, wrapping up the talk one, shameless one is I'm developing a consulting and seminar system on this. If anybody's interested in reselling this to your clients or doing it in your organization, talk to me because I'm just getting off the ground, and my first clients are going to be helping me learn how to do this. If you're interested in the book where I cover a lot more than this and a lot more detail, 30% discount code in your bag. If you're in the ACN, you get a free copy. The second thing is that this is the organization I'm a chair of. It's Ethical Issues in Science and Technology. Since everybody here is working in technology, I thought somebody would be interested. Please talk to me later if this sounds like your cup of tea. And I don't know if we have time for questions because I really ran over time. But feel free to see me right now or anytime in the future. If you get the PDFs for this talk, this is the stuff that I wasn't sure if I would get to. I have more details on yak shaving. And unfortunately, it's the same slide. I'd have to actually talk you through this. This is in the book. Fail successfully, yak shaving. There are about 5 or 6 sections of the book which are unique and original. You won't find it in any other productivity training. I think this could be one of the most important parts. The transitioning that brings you up, and the fail successfully, because it's inevitable you're going to get to this point. And I rushed, so I hope that was good for you, because that's it. Thank you.